Hello and welcome back everybody. Yes, I'm back with another video looking at one of the 1/6 scale Big Chief Studios Doctor Who figures, and this week of course it is the 11th Doctor. Now, in case you haven't seen my previous videos, I did want to point out that this is specifically looking at the Zavvi reissue, which for all intents and purposes is essentially a budget re-release of these figures, although they're not that cheap, but they come a lot pared down when it comes to the accessories and the overall presentation of the packaging. Case in point, if we look at the original release, we can see obviously that this 11th Doctor figure came with a lot of extra goodies, pieces of the TARDIS, various cubes and bits and pieces that we see in the series that this figure sadly does not come with. But that's not to say this figure doesn't come with anything, because he does come with some very cool accessories as it is. If you've seen any of the other videos in this series looking at these 1/6 scale reissues from Zavvi, you will know what to expect when it comes to the packaging. The packaging itself is quite nice. There's not an awful lot going on, but we do have some Gallifreyan symbols, which is quite nice, and the colour itself is fairly attractive. I do like the yellow lines contrasting nicely against that dark blue background. I think that works really well, and the hexagon in the centre of the packaging there showing off the figure inside is a nice touch. If we look at the side panel though, it's a little bit nondescript. It just has the Doctor Who logo and it doesn't tell you which character it is, and I think, you know, a portrait here would have been really fun for those of us who like to stack up our action figures on the shelf, say, so that we can see who they are. As it is, this is just a little bit bland. If we look at the reverse of the packaging, again, it's exactly the same as it was for the other figures in this wave, and we can see the other figures listed here. And they're nicely coloured, so I think it looks fairly attractive. You could put this on display, to be fair, but as I said, it gets a little bit repetitive if you have a number of them on show. When we lift the top of the lid and we pull the figure out, we see that this green card comes with it, which is a separate piece which lists the items that come with this figure and is an image of the figure itself, which can be separated and put back into its place in the box. Now, as you can see, the presentation here isn't the greatest. I really am not a big fan of this plastic packaging that he's in. The packaging is fine, don't get me wrong, it keeps him safe and secure, and that's fantastic, but the outer thin white cardboard feels very cheap, it's very flimsy and not very solid, and it just feels like a proper cost-cutting exercise here, which is a real shame because I do feel like this compromises the overall feel and integrity of this high-end collectible. I'm a big fan of the 11th Doctor, so I was super excited to get my hands on this. Plus, a lot of the production images I had seen sold me on him because I thought the sculpt was absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I have to say, when he's in hand, there's something just ever so slightly off, and I can't put my finger on it. And I'm not sure if it's just me, or if there's been some kind of running change, because to me, the proportions of the head to the body just look ever so slightly off, like just not quite right somehow. In terms of the likeness, I actually think this is a very good likeness of Matt Smith. I think it works really well, but again, it doesn't quite convince as well as some of the production photos I've seen and some in-hand photos I've seen from other collectors, so I'm not sure whether I've been unlucky or whether something's been changed here, but it doesn't look quite as good as I was expecting. Now, overall, the presentation and the tailoring is really nicely done, but I did have a few gripes. Mine came with a very ruffled collar. In fact, his collar was sticking up in the packaging, which wasn't good. So, and his bow tie was underneath his collar as well, so I had kind of to play and get that into position. I know it's a very minor gripe, but it does feel a little bit frustrating if it's a bit creased and it's not quite right, especially when we're paying these sort of prices for these high-end collectibles. His tweed jacket is very nice. It is quite stiff, as it should be, and the texture of it works very well. If we open it up, we do see that silk inner lining, which is very nice, and of course he has those elastic red braces which are securely fitted to his trousers there, which work really well. And of course, he also has an interior pocket where he can store his sonic screwdriver, which is pretty cool. I also like that the leather elbow patches have been sewn in individually. This gives it a little bit of different texture and is pretty accurate to what we see on screen, so this is a nice touch. On a slightly more critical note though, I did notice that his exterior pockets are completely sewn up. They're false pockets, they don't work, and I don't understand why they didn't make these functional pockets. He is given these two unique hands which I quite like, the thumbs up hands. I think this works really quite well, and of course he does have a couple of extras that we'll see a little bit later. His boots are one moulded plastic. Sadly, there's no paint wash running through these to emphasise and will give him any kind of texture, which is a shame, and the laces are just sculpted in there and it's the same base colour as the rest of the plastic, which is a bit disappointing. If you roll his leg up though, you can see they have at least given him socks, which is a pretty nice touch. The base is the same one we've seen with all of these figures. It does light up, which is quite nice, but as I've bemoaned before, I'm not overly keen on it having this Doctor Who logo, which is now defunct of course, and it just feels a little bit incongruous really. It's not quite appropriate for this Doctor, and I wish each Doctor just had their own individual logo that was associated with their era, but again, I think this must have been a cost-cutting exercise. In terms of articulation, he does have a ball joint at the bottom of his neck, and there's also a swivel at the top of the neck there, so there's no issues getting him to spin his head all the way around, lean from left to right, or indeed bend forwards and backwards. There's plenty of motion here and plenty of room to get some fantastic posing, which is excellent stuff. He has ball joints in the shoulders, so those arms do lift up and out. I think there's a complementary bicep swivel at the top there as well. Double jointed elbow, so he can get the hand right the way back to his head there, which is great. And there is a ball joint in the wrist, so again the hand will rotate all the way around, and of course it will hinge forwards and backwards. Again, is it just me or is there something slightly off with the proportions? I feel like the head is just too small. Anyway, I digress. Now he does have a swivel at the waist, so he can definitely spin from side to side. I'm never sure if this is actually a ball joint because it feels like there's a little bit of give, but he doesn't really want to move from side to side. There is some kind of crunch there that will allow him to bend forwards and backwards a little bit. It's not a huge amount, but there's clearly some articulation here. There's a hinge at the hips, so the legs do kick out to the side. There's an upper thigh swivel there as well. His legs will kick forwards, they'll kick backwards, and there is double jointed knees, so you can kick those legs all the way back there, which is great. Now there is a swivel at the boot, but sadly there is no hinge. As I mentioned earlier, his accessories are massively pared down to what we get in the original release, but I have to be honest, I actually think the accessories we got here are probably the best ones, and I'm not missing the other ones too much at all. So he comes with an extra pair of hands, psychic paper, which we saw previously with the David Tennant and the Christopher Eccleston, his watch, which I do think is very, very nicely done. This is actually finely detailed and very, very beautifully painted, so I think they've done a really good job with this. 2 versions of his sonic screwdriver, including the extended version, which is great, and, of course, his fez. All in all then, I do feel like they've given us the best accessories for the 11th Doctor, and there's enough here to create a number of different looks, including some of those signature key looks for this character, which work really very well. If we look at the fez, I did want to point out that the way you remove this, because I thought this was actually really clever and quite innovative on Big Chief's part, to be fair to them. You simply remove the back of the head, which is interesting, and it is held together by a magnet. Likewise, in the fez, there is another magnet there that just allows it to just pop into place, so you don't have to worry about being overly aggressive. This will allow you to simply remove it and place it back in very, very smoothly, and the line is absolutely seamless. So I think they've done a tremendous job of this. And all told, I have to say, I actually think I prefer him with the fez, weirdly enough. I actually think it makes him look a lot more colourful, a lot more distinctive, and it just feels a lot more like the 11th Doctor, which is unusual. I wasn't expecting that, so I really love that they give him the fez here. I think this looks really, really good, and I think overall this outfit looks pretty nice as well. As I said, I'm not entirely convinced about the proportions of the head. That looks just a little bit off to me against the body. The body just looks a little bit too broad and too big maybe, so I'm not sure if the head has been resized or if it's just me, but it doesn't look quite right. But that said, I do really like the figure, and I think they've done a pretty nice job of it all in all. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.